You're listening to Storytime in Paris on Paris Underground Radio. For more great content and to join our book club, please join us on Patreon. Since well before Victor Hugo looked up at Notre Dame and thought, what if a hunchback lived in there? Authors have been inspired by Paris. Welcome to the Storytime in Paris podcast on Paris Underground Radio, where we keep that tradition alive by showcasing an author with a French connection in each episode. Every episode will feature 5 questions asked by you, our author's biggest fans, and answered live on air. Then our authors will treat us to a reading of an excerpt from their book. I'm your host, Jennifer Garrity. Would you like to join the Storytime in Paris book club? Head on over to patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio and stay tuned to the end of this episode for more information. Yesterday, February 21st, would have been Anäis Nin's 120th birthday. In honor of this illustrious occasion, I have invited the lovely and talented Eve back once again to act as a channel for our interview. If you've listened to my interviews with Victor Hugo, George Sand, and Notre Dame, you already know how this works. The enormously talented Eve will channel Anais' spirit so I can speak with her directly, while also sharing any insights she picks up along the way. Anäis Nin is a famed diarist, essayist, novelist, and writer of short stories and erotica who lived from 1903 to 1977. A finalist for the Neustadt International Prize for Literature in 1976, French-born American Anaîs is known for her personal journals and is widely hailed as one of the best writers of female erotica. She spent most of her life in the US with the exception of a 16-year period during the Belle Époque when she lived in Paris. She was a bigamist with husbands in New York and California and has had numerous affairs with people like psychoanalyst Otto Rank and writer Henry Miller. Without further ado, please allow me to introduce Eve and, soon after, Anäis Nin, author of Delta of Venus. Hello, Ev. Thank you for joining me once again on the podcast.
You know, it's always a pleasure to do this little game with you.
I think this is your 4th time now, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so, yes.
We did Victor Hugo and George Sand and Notre Dame. And now today we're going to be speaking with Anäis Nin.
Yeah, this will be fun because I've really never read anything of this author and I never knew anything about her till you talked of her. And I just know whatever you wrote in the Facebook intro that you put there.
Oh, really? Oh, that's so exciting. Yeah, she's someone that I learned about a long time ago, maybe like in high school or university or something. She was like someone people would whisper about.
From what I read about her, and I have a feeling I know why they're whispering about and what they're whispering about, but I don't know what to expect.
I don't either. I'm surprisingly nervous about this conversation. But before we get into it, can you explain to the listeners who maybe haven't listened to the other episodes what you will be doing today and how this will work?
Okay, so I will be doing what we call channeling. Channeling is very much like what you do when you call a spirit, except that instead of calling a spirit from outside, I will call the part of me who is Anäis Nin. Because if we assume that the universe is just one big entity and each of us is a sparkle of this entity, we all have access to everyone's thoughts, everyone's feelings through space and time. So I will be feeling whatever the character, the person would have been feeling if she was actually interviewed by Jen. And I really recommend listening to the other podcasts because the experience is always different. And I will give you as much feedback on the physical sensations as I can, because sometimes I will speak, sometimes I'll just have notions.
Yeah, it's a fascinating process. And so far, they've all been so wildly different. And I think, especially coming after Notre Dame, I think this is going to be wildly different as well. So from time to time, you will have your own impressions. And so then you'll stop and say that it's you speaking and you'll tell us what you're thinking and then get back into it. It's visual for me, but for anyone listening, that's what will be happening.
We'll do our best.
Yes. All right. Well, you let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
Hello, Anäis Nin. It's very nice to make your acquaintance today. I'm very excited to speak with you.
Oh, thank you. I'm slightly nervous. I don't really know what to expect. I feel valued being here right now and just talking about me. It seems strange that you want to talk about me. Do you want to talk about what I did, or did you want to talk about me?
Yeah, I want to talk about all of it. I'm a little bit starstruck, if I'm honest. I'm a big fan.
Oh, I'm blushing now. Oh, oh, please don't. Um, it's really strange to be here with another woman and just not having men around commenting, and it feels intimidating and liberating at the same time.
Excellent. So you are known among us as being a diarist and an essayist and a novelist and a writer of short stories and of erotica. How would you describe yourself?
Right now, I have chills because being known for so much, it's strange because when you're just a human, when you're just a woman, and then you're all this on the side, it's like the Anais is not exactly me, but at the same time, she's a part of me that I dare to put out and to show off. I'm actually shy, but I would say I'm a shy person who dares to try, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And if it does work, I'm very happy about it.
Well, one of the themes of this podcast in general is a connection to France. And I wanted to know about your connection to Paris. How do you feel about Paris?
This is Eve speaking. When you said the word Paris and you said France, I had this kind of breathe in and this sort of at the same time. The kind of maybe what you would think of a typical holiday on the continent. The feeling that the Americans have when they think like Emily in Paris, that kind of which may have nothing to do with the actuality and the actual feeling you have when you're in Paris, but there is this. It's almost liberating. This is the feeling I'm getting. So, Paris. Oh, Paris. I like the air, the breeze that you have when you walk on the pavements and the Sacré-Cœur. That kind of just breathing in the flow of people, the whatever is happening inside their heads when you look at them and they don't know that you know, but maybe they want you to know. And I don't know how to explain it exactly, but it's a place where you can live outside, live on the inside, and leave things at the same time inside and outside of your head. And I have this feeling of a tablecloth, a white tablecloth, and a glass of wine. That's Paris. This and the breeze on the tablecloth.
That's a lovely view of Paris. So before we get into the questions, I have a couple of confessions. And the first is, I mentioned being a bit starstruck. People will ask this question about who would you sit around a dinner table with, living or dead? And I would say that you were a name that has always come to mind.
Oh, don't make me blush again.
And the second is that it's a bit intimidating on my end to ask questions of someone who has already shared so much of her life with the public. It's hard to know where to start.
Just start. What is important is not where you start. It's about taking up the pace and then moving forward till you reach the destination that maybe you didn't know you were going for. just start.
Looking back at your life now, are you happy with how much of yourself you did share with the public?
There is this love-hate relationship with outside, because deeply you want to be known. But at the same time, when you see some people, what they do with what you give them, it's saddening. I would say, what is done, and it was an experience. And in the moment, it may be hard, but in the long run, you notice that it was worth it. And maybe you will suffer from interactions with other people, but whatever they think about you should not change the way you feel about yourself in your core. So I would say just learn from whatever you would consider a mistake of mine and make the most of what you have.
When you were writing your journals and your diaries that you kept for years, did you write them with the idea of them being published to the world?
Published, not really, but I thought that maybe someone would read them at some point. I imagined what they would feel stumbling upon these words, like wanting to be a butterfly on someone's shoulder when they just open it and go, that I would have wanted to feel that, to know that. But in the beginning, not at all. No.
You were really a pioneer in the world of female erotica, and you're still lauded as this sort of revolutionary in this field. And I imagine, well, you have to be quite daring to be the first to do anything. But I imagine that putting forward the idea that women are strong, sexual beings with their own interests and desires in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s would take even more courage. And I would love to know what that experience was like for you.
This is Eve speaking. When you started talking about this aspect of her life, I just settled in the chair and became stronger, more empowered. And my back was straighter. I was really owning the place where I'm sitting. And I felt like a queen. This is the feeling. And when later you talked about empowerment and all that and being strong, this is really, from what I feel, what made her the author aside from the woman. That she was actually feeling safer in this work than in her daily life, outside of this part of her, this character that she was displaying. It's really interesting, really, really interesting. So let's go back to Anais. Don't you just like feeling empowered? Don't you just like how suddenly you are in control? Suddenly you become something they chase and not their prey anymore. It's taking back our righteous place as females in this herd of humans. We need to own the fact that maybe we're not physically as strong as a male body. But our heart is so strong. Our passion is so much stronger and deeper. We are like rooted into this so much deeper than they are. This is why we can offer so much and we suffer so much. And they crave for this because they will never have this kind of roots. Well, actually, maybe at some point they will, but they would have to work a lot on themselves first to own their part of femininity. But what I do is showing how you don't have to be a man to be strong. If you just own being a female, being a woman, and embody it through and through, you're stronger than them. This is why they will want to go after you, because they can't have you and keep their paradigm. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Does French culture sometimes leave you scratching your head? Well, you might enjoy listening to our sister podcast, Navigating the French, hosted by journalist Emily Monaco. Each episode focuses on a different word in the French language, and Emily is joined by an expert who will help explore what that word says about French culture. Listen now to Navigating the French on ParisUndergroundRadio.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be right back with Storytime in Paris after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Storytime in Paris. And I can probably imagine, but can you talk a little bit about the reactions that you had from people, from men and from women? Were they vastly different, wildly different?
Vastly or wildly, I don't know, because you remember the extremes. You remember the one trying to put you down and the ones trying to put you on a pedestal. You have those that would praise you in the public and despise you in private. Mm. And the complete opposite. I would say that I was like a magnifying glass for people's desires, for people's boundaries, and for their own hypocrisy. Now, I was just one tool of the time that made people change, face their truth. But I have everything and anything, pretty much like you still do today when you're a woman in show business or in any art business, in business in general.
Can we talk about some of the people in your life?
Sure.
I feel...
Well, actually, I said sure, but I'm not so sure right now. Okay. We'll try, and I will tell you if I don't want to speak about one or the other.
I have to start with the biggest and most obvious. Can you talk about your feelings and your relationships towards Henry Miller?
This is Eve speaking. When you said the name, I had chills come up my spine, and there was a bit of a standing back, like I wanted to take a step back, tiny one, just bracing a bit maybe. So this is the first feeling, was like, let's be careful. I'll see if I can get something else. Henry Miller. Complicated. Very complicated. I'm not sure I really want to talk about... No. Not really, no. This is Eve speaking. There is sadness coming up. Maybe grief. I'm not sure. So it's a complicated and still very emotional subject, it seems. I'm sorry.
Okay. What about the psychoanalyst Otto Rank?
A lot of fun. This is Eve speaking. I'm not having specifics coming up, but I have a notion of party, the kind of party that you would have in private apartments late at night after all the business is done, and you're just see things that you would never see anywhere else. Maybe if you've seen the movie Babylon, this would be 10% of the party at the beginning. So it's that kind of secretive, but at the same time, everybody knows this is what I get. Concerning the person himself, there is a real feeling of wanting to love. Now, I don't know who this person is, so I don't know if it's a love of mockery, a love of this is just a bro, or something like that. But the general feeling is positive, and there is no sadness, so there is maybe less emotional attachment to that person.
What about your husband, Ian Hugo?
You and your questions. This is Eve speaking. I'm having a feeling of opening a door in the spring on a garden, something that would be at the back of a house in a city. Some trees, some flowers, something peaceful, but at the same time like an island of peace in the middle of a tempest, something like this. There is really no comparison to the feelings regarding the two previous men. But now I would say there is it's a notion of an anchor, someone, maybe a best friend, but not a best friend like you would party hard with, more like the one you would be able to confide in. But that's it. I'm not feeling any sort of wild passion or something like this.
What about your second husband, Robert Pohl?
This is Eve speaking. There you have some passion. This is really the feeling of second marriage, like the one you chose, you wanted to forget about the first or something like this, the one that you will take everything you can from. And I have a notion of two young people running through a carnival or alongside a river and just having fun. This is it. This is basically the feeling I'm getting is that, just that.
So speaking of these two husbands, I have to ask you about what it was like to be married to both of them at the same time. Did you have any moral quandaries about essentially lying to these two men?
This is Eve speaking. The feeling that came first was sort of a rebellion, a sort of whatever man, morals, blah, blah, blah. And a pride about being able to achieve that. So this is really the naughty Anais that will be answering these questions, I have a feeling. Lying to them. Let's not debate about what is a lie by omission, a white lie, or whatever. When you have two people whom together can meet all your needs, isn't that just a dream? Oh, I'm getting the notion of polyamory. That would be it. I really had this feeling for them. We were a polycule now. This is Eve speaking. I don't know if the two men knew, but she really has this deep love for both of them, even if the love is different. So it really matches the definition of a polyamorous relationship. I don't think you will get any more info at this point.
Is there anything else that you wish that we knew about you?
Some people, I wish they would know about my favorite pastry or my favorite wine or my favorites. No, I don't know if there is anything else I would like them to know, but I would like them to remember that behind Anäis Nin, I'm still just a woman. I'm still shy. I still blush. I'm still, I would not say humble because I don't know how to answer. I'm feeling lost. I would like them to know that there is the image and there is the truth, and an image projected is dull and is flat, just like a movie is flat on a screen and will never move, will never change. But the people who made the movie, the moment the scene was shot and then cut, it was different. So you can never truly feel what I felt and how I lived and get a 360 degrees notion of what life was like. And I really wish someone would invent something that would allow you to dive into whatever it was that I've lived and really feel it for yourself, not just read it, another transcription from someone else. Just make the experience. This is the one thing I will regret, not being able to have and to go through all the experiences life could offer, because you would need an eternal lifetime to just live through everything, see every angle. And but for my tiny body, I managed.
It's funny that you say that. That's the one thing I've always said is my regret, that I can only live one lifetime at a time.
Yeah, well, technically, you could create a persona for yourself and live a second life at the same time as your first. It worked for me.
That's true. I guess that's a good way to double it up. I guess this sort of leads to the next question, which is there anything that you miss about being alive?
Probably flesh. That's what they say. They say all the angels and creatures and entities wish they would have the flesh that would allow them to feel whatever we feel as humans and have this full experience. So maybe yes, flesh. Just like you miss your bed and you can think about the warmth of your bed and your pillow that you left 10 minutes before, and now you're in the shower and like, I want to get back. This is it. I'm in the shower right now and you're still in the bed and I'm so envious. So please, please, please make the most of your life.
Is there any final message that you might want to leave to the young women growing up in the world today?
If you didn't get the message from all the times I repeated it during this interview, just listen to it again. It's okay if you don't get it the first time. It's not a failure. The more you do something, the more you learn. You always learn something new. And if you don't learn something new, that means it wasn't done properly or at the level you're able to. So just keep at it. Keep doing it. May it be sex or listening to interviews or reading books. Reread the books again. You will notice things that you did not before. You will understand a character in another way because in the meantime you had this new experience to add to your experience. So have remorse, no regrets. Try. Feel remorse because you did something bad, but never regret not trying it. You will only live once in this body, in this setting, with these breasts. So use them. Now, I think that was the final message. Also, don't drink too much. Make sure you just remember what happens, else you will never be able to write about it and become a rich author or famous author or whatever you want to be.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been a real honor.
Oh, it was a real pleasure. I wish we could do that more often. Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Are you searching for spiritual guidance? The Heart of You podcast is an exploration into your soul through intuition, spirituality, divination, and unconditional love. Host Annette Deleu is a spiritual guidance coach, intuitive, Akashic, and tarot reader who discusses practical ways to integrate spiritual growth into your everyday life. Listen now to The Heart of You on parisundergroundradio.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be right back with Storytime in Paris after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Storytime in Paris.
That was interesting, with all the talk about female empowerment, patriarchy, feminism, all these questions, all the burlesque fever coming up in Paris specifically. I would really, really like to know more about the three men in her life, because I really have no idea what they've done. Do you know?
The men that I mentioned?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, Henry Miller is a very well-known American author. She met him here in the 1930s, and they had a very passionate love affair, allegedly him and with his wife. And then Otto Rank was a psychoanalyst who studied under Freud.
Mm-hmm.
And her husband was a rich banker, but I don't know much else about him. And Rupert Pohl was a handsome actor who decided to go off and live in the woods.
Oh, that explains this. It's very interesting because you never know when you channel someone, living or dead, by the way, or an animal, you never know what you will get. And the impressions, very often you're like, maybe this is not right. And in the end, if you look at the events, it will match. Except sometimes when you have info that was not for sure, and then you get to understand how it could have been so not a fact, well known. So that was really interesting. She was so shy as a woman, and she really needed this protection that was given to her by using this persona. And I think she's not using her first name. Like Rose, Jeanne, Anais. So it would be her third. That she used this part of her, really a part of her that she put forward as a protector to all the rest of her that was more fragile. And it allowed her to do things that she would maybe not have allowed Rose or Jeanne to do. So it's also interesting to look at from the view of Carl Jung, with all the deep shadows that we have and the unconscious parts that take over in situations. So thank you for having me meet her. Thank you very much.
Thank you for channeling her for me. That was like a dream come true. So...
But sure, she really wanted to talk to you much, but in more of a private conversation, let's say.
Informal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, friends.
I could see that. Yeah. What did it feel like to be in her body?
I really felt the shyness. I felt the shoulders go up, the head going a bit down, having this pout with the lips, and really, really being shy, and all the blushing was very, very interesting too. But then when we started to talk about the erotica part, I really felt almost what I would imagine a dominatrix feels like. Like, I am here. You won't move me. If I want to stay, I'm here to stay, and I'm in charge, and you'll do whatever I want. That was the feeling I got, and it was very, very powerful. And I wonder how this was taken by the average male at that time. But I also know that in the 30s, you had a lot of artists who were, let's say, depraved. So she would not have been too much of a shock in this environment.
Yeah, it's true. And she was here in Paris at that time. That's where she met Henry Miller, the time between the wars.
She would not have had a good time in the US during Prohibition, probably.
I imagine that's true. All right. Well, thank you. Do you want to give any of your details, any of your socials?
I'd just like to tell people, this is a warning. Do not do Ouija. Do not do any sort of channeling from the outside, because you never know what you are calling, because anyone would say, My name is Anais, with the voice of Bob the trucker who murdered 10 people outside of your town. So please do not do that. There are safer ways to do it. If you want to, you can find my contact on the Paris Underground Radio details, and I will happily give you the information you need if you want to try channeling for yourself.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Eve. This was wonderful.
My pleasure as always, and looking forward to talking with another author for Halloween, right?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Then thank you and see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you again to Eve for channeling this interview. Each time is so wildly different, and today's conversation felt especially like a dream come true. Normally, I read a bit to you from some of the author's work, but Anais' work is still under copyright, so I'll just direct you to some of my favorites, including Delta of Venus, Little Birds, and her diary from 1931 to 1934. Please join me next week when I'll be speaking with Edward Chisholm, author of A Waiter in Paris, Adventures in the Dark Heart of the City. Check back to see if your questions have been answered and to hear a reading from his book. Thank you for listening to Storytime in Paris. Please remember to rate and review us and also tell a friend. The more people who know about this podcast, the more we'll be able to grow and the more I'll be able to share fabulous books and their authors with you. Join the Storytime Book Club, which welcomes authors who have been featured on the podcast to come talk more in depth about their books. Since we keep the podcast spoiler-free, this is the perfect chance to get all your specific questions answered. Please visit patreon.com/Paris Underground Radio for more information. I'm your host, Jennifer Garrity. You can find me on all socials at Jennyphoria. That's JennyPhoria. Thank you for listening, and until next week, happy reading! This episode of Storytime in Paris was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please visit parisundergroundradio.com.